Well, in the wake of natural disasters, wherever they play out, there's the recovery and the questioning. How could have we been better prepared? What could have we done better? And who should we blame? Well, Ray Nagin knows all about those sorts of questions and the search for answers. He was the mayor of New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina tore through the United States Gulf Coast in 2005. More than 1,700 people were killed, and the confidence of a nation to take care of itself in the face of such a disaster was shaken. Well, 6 years on, Ray Nagin has written a book about the hurricane and its aftermath titled Katrina's Secrets, Storms After the Storm. And he's in Australia as a guest of the US Studies Centre at Sydney University to attend a conference on emergency management. And I spoke with Ray Nagin earlier today. Ray Nagin, thanks so much for your time.
Well, Scott, it's great to be here and it's great to be back in Australia.
6 years on from Katrina, how is New Orleans, your home city, recovering?
Well, New Orleans is doing quite well. If you go and study other disasters that are similar, if there are similar disasters, it normally takes about 10 to 15 years to recover. We're in year 6. We've got about 85% of our population back. The economy is strong. So I think the fundamentals are there for a full recovery.
For you who knows the city so well, when you walk through your hometown, what strikes you as, yes, we're getting that right, or, ooh, we've still got a lot to go there?
I think on the infrastructure thing, we're getting a lot of things that are absolutely right. The hurricane protection system is probably second to none. It's comprehensive. And I think if another Hurricane Katrina were to hit New Orleans, you wouldn't see the kind of catastrophic failures that we saw. I think the streets, the playgrounds, the parks, the government facilities, the housing, all of that we've gotten well. I think where we still struggle a bit is affordable housing is still a little bit of a challenge, where it's difficult for some of our citizens in a lower economic strata to come back. And I think the mental health issues, there are still many of our citizens who are struggling with post-traumatic stress disorders.
Now, in your memoir, you wrote that political forces had secretly conspired to slow down the recovery. Who were those forces? And conspiracy is a big word. What do you mean by that?
Well, you know, as I went back and looked at everything, one of the things that struck me as we were going through this recovery was, why did it take so long for us to receive the dollars, the recovery dollars? It took 2.5 years for those dollars to start to flow and actually hit our citizens. And there was really no reason why it should have taken that long. So that's one of the signs that I point to. And another thing was, there were some open discussions about not allowing certain citizens to come back to the city, doing moratoriums on rebuilds, and this was all open and well documented. So those are some of the things that I point to when I talk about there seem to be some open conspiracies to try and change the makeup of the city and to try and slow down the recovery.
How did you respond to that?
Well, I categorically rejected it. I basically said that anyone who was from New Orleans prior to Hurricane Katrina had an absolute right to return to the city as long as they built better, higher, and stronger, and that we as government had a responsibility to protect them. And that's what we ended up doing.
Now, you, as mayor, you were also criticised because you were in the post for another 4 years post-Katrina, and you were criticised for not doing enough as well, or your administration not doing enough in regard to recovery. What more could have you done?
You know, that's a great question. I mean, I hear the critics, and they talk about that we should have done it faster, we should have done more, we should have, you know, moved the city further along. But as I mentioned to you earlier, with a 10 to 15 year normal horizon on the recovery, and we're in year 6, and we've come so far, I'm not sure what else we could have done. I mean, maybe we could have gotten the federal government and the state to release the money a lot quicker. We tried a lot of things, but it just didn't work. And when you utilize federal dollars, you have to go through their procedures. So it takes 6 months to do environmental reviews, design work, and then go to construction. So it just takes some time to rebuild a city that had been totally evacuated and 80% destroyed.
In terms of preparation and doing more during the hurricane itself, what's your biggest regret? What's the one thing that makes you go, I should have done that, or I wish I hadn't have done that?
Well, you know, there are many things that I think about as it relates to the events of Katrina. But as the storm was approaching, Katrina was such a deceptive storm. It wasn't until 24 hours before she made landfall that she actually allowed us to really firmly understand where she was going as she was headed for New Orleans. We had gotten a significant number of people out of the city, but I had the dilemma of calling for a mandatory evacuation. And there was a 10-hour window where I got a call from Max Mayfield, and he said, "You need to do this." And I called my city attorney, and she did the research. Maybe I should have just called it at that point. It was overnight. I don't know if it would have made a difference, but that's one of the biggest regrets or things that I think about.
What's the biggest lesson you learned from the Katrina experience that you now impart to others about how to get through the force and the pitfalls of not just Mother Nature, but also human nature in the course of a disaster?
Well, you know, the book is entitled Katrina's Secrets, and the subtitle is Storms After the Storms. There were many storms after Katrina hit us that, you know, I learned a lot of lessons. You know, a storm like Katrina or an event like Katrina brings out the best and the worst of people. And I learned a lot about both. Many people volunteered and came and helped us, which really started our recovery and allowed us to move forward before the federal and state dollars came here. But I also learned that, you know, some people use the event to do some things that they really shouldn't have done. Some of our neighbors further flooded us, didn't allow people to march across the Mississippi River to get to a better place, and they were stuck in a convention center in the Superdome. There were lots of race and class issues that manifested themselves after Hurricane Katrina. So I learned the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I try and share that with people all over the world.
In terms of major natural disasters, the way the world responds is usually after the event.
Yeah.
They give aid. Yeah. They come in and offer help then. In what ways do you think there can be a better global response before an event to globally prepare better for the inevitable natural disasters that beset us?
Well, I think the global community, if there was a way that we could formally get together and talk about these disasters, because, you know, they're increasing. Since Katrina, just in the United States, there's been 400 plus major disasters. And as I look around the world, there's disasters that are happening on a fairly regular basis. As a matter of fact, someone dies from a natural disaster every 8 seconds somewhere in the world. So if we could formally get together and talk about how we can get together globally and respond to the catastrophic ones, not the normal ones. But if something is catastrophic, especially when it's a natural disaster being linked with a man-made disaster, like Hurricane Katrina and levee failures, and in Japan it was the tsunami and nuclear. Unfortunately, we may see more of those.
As you mentioned before, you subtitled your book, The Storms After the Storm. Now, Australia has a lot of natural disasters. In fact, the state of Queensland is currently holding an inquiry into the events before and during and after the disastrous floods that hit there earlier this year. In terms of what you just said before, what have you learned about how leaders can respond to and avoid feeding into those political and bureaucratic storms after a disaster?
You know, it just depends. I think there are some events that are just so big and so catastrophic and catch leaders and governments off guard that I think they will continue to struggle with these types of disasters. My advice to leaders is the same advice I got after Hurricane Katrina. I said, look, you're gonna talk to a lot of consultants and experts. Hear them, but really listen to the people who are most affected. Because if you have a disaster, if you bring them together, you empower them, they will take the recovery and drive it to the levels that it needs to be. And that's the key thing that all leaders need to understand after a disaster. Don't try and do everything yourself. Get the people involved and empower them.
Ray Nagin, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time.
I wish you the best. Thank you.